Svalbard, I would say, is a land that's perfectly designed for skiing. It's a land of fascinating diversity of landscape and wildlife. It's a beautiful place to be, and why I keep returning year after year. Why ski and sail? Our ship is like a backcountry ski lodge that moves. The ship we've used for most of the past 8 years is the Norderly, and it is arguably the prettiest ship in the Arctic. So what does a typical day for us in Svalbard look like? My name's Tom Wolfe. I'm a mountain guide from Canmore, Alberta. Since 1995, I've been running my business, Sawback Alpine Adventures. We offer trips across Western Canada and internationally to destinations like Japan, Antarctica, Norway, and Svalbard. I'm an internationally certified IFMGA ACMG mountain guide, and I've been running these trips to Svalbard now for 8 years. So in this webinar, I'm excited to introduce you to our Svalbard ski and sail expeditions. I want to run through what they are, where they are, and how we run them. I want to describe to you what a day on board looks like and what's special about our trips. And then at the end, we'll talk a little bit about our 2025 and 2026 availability. So Svalbard. It's a remote and incredibly beautiful mountainous land. The Svalbard archipelago consists of 9 different islands. The greatest of these is Spitsbergen, which is a very large island relative to the other ones. The archipelago, it's located between roughly 74 degrees at the southern end and about 80 degrees of latitude at the northern end, which puts it way, way above the Arctic Circle, which is at 66.5 degrees. As a result, it's got 2 special seasons. We got the polar night and the polar day. Both last about 2 months. And the polar night is very dark. It has no sunlight or twilight, the only natural light coming from things like moonlight, starlight, and the aurora borealis, or the northern lights. Polar day, on the other hand, is bright and energized period of 24-hour sun, which on the solstice on June 22nd gets no lower than about 12 degrees above the horizon. Okay, so we know where Svalbard is, but why go there unless you're planning on a wall photography excursion? My initial impressions were that there can't be good skiing next to the ocean in high Arctic areas. It took me no time at all to realize how wrong I was. Svalbard's magic immediately took hold of me, starting with my first Zodiac ride to the shores of Bukta. In fact, Svalbard, I would say, is a land that's perfectly designed for skiing. It's a land of fascinating diversity of landscape and wildlife, and it's a beautiful place to be. Majestic mountain landscapes, like in this photograph, frame the ski runs. This photo was taken looking back towards the Monaco Fjellet, or Monaco Peak, rising out of Bukta, which was named after the scientific explorer Albert I, Prince of Monaco, back at the turn of the 20th century. A few moments later, we glide down to the seashore, the cool salty waters lapping at the rocks, kelp swaying in the current. In the distance, Spitsbergen glimmering in the haze, and our ship waits to pick us up. Svalbard is a land that is almost exclusively wild, but there are a few incongruous exceptions, symbolized by this snapshot of satellite radar towers alongside dog sleds in the high Arctic outpost town of Longyearbyen. As I mentioned, Svalbard is a land made for ski touring. Peak bagging, loop tours, traverses, where we get dropped off on one side of a peninsula, picked up on the other side, are all part of the program. Svalbard is a wilderness in all senses of the word. That includes the fact that there are no avalanche bulletins and very little in the way of information exchange amongst operators. The guiding staff are all trained ski and mountain guides with years of experience in both Svalbard and Canada. And we are accustomed to running safe programs in areas with scarce data to go on. We conduct guides meetings twice each day with a thorough analysis of the snowpack from our day's observations. But always we are sensitive to the fact that we need to be extra cautious and choose terrain with a conservative mindset. So Svalbard ski and sail expeditions are mainly about classic ski tour lines. But the spring snowpack is generally stable and safe from avalanches, so skiing bigger lines is often possible. When the conditions are right and a group is keen, we like to go for it. Here, soft new snow undisturbed by wind or sunlight provided an exhilarating and effortless descent on a slope that pitched over to 40 degrees at its steepest in Lozov Fjellet. Here's a picture of mountain guide Christian Schlumpf, and he's scoping out some couloir in the area of Bukta. We do often ski steeper lines, and for this reason, you'll find that boot crampons and an optional ice axe are found on the equipment list. It's not just couloirs, but steep faces and big lines that we look for when the conditions are right. They're always a possibility with the stable spring snowpack. This is the last day in a week of incredible descents near Siltop in Bukta. Well, skiing in Svalbard is not just about snow, it's also about ice, and lots of it. From this little precipice next to Bukta, there's a 360-degree panoramic view of glacier ice, sea ice, and steep mountainous ice faces. It's a land of tremendous glacier activity. Seracs are continually being pushed and tumbled by gravity into the frozen sea. There are a few more impressive glaciated regions in the world, and this is at the toe of Esmarkbrain after a ski tour on Stendegerfjellet, on Ramfjellet. It's also one of the closest glaciers to our starting point in Longyearbyen, just 5 hours of sailing away. Especially these days when glaciers around the world are falling apart and disappearing, it's refreshing to come to a place like Svalbard where ice is still king. Here's a view of how a glacier forms. The winter's storm snow falls and lands on the old snow and ice. The overburdening weight of new snow pressures the old snow and makes it denser. As each successive winter adds to the load, the underlying layers turn to hard ice, and eventually the air is pressed out. With time, the weight of the glacier itself is tugged by gravity and moves like molasses slowly downwards towards the sea, where it melts and calves off. The snowpack is as varied as the landscape we travel through, and Svalbard is technically considered a desert, which makes for abundant good weather skiing and firm snow surfaces. But it's also a cold, snowy place at times, so often we enjoy soft snow conditions after the brief storms, and suddenly it feels like we're in Canada in midwinter. If you look closely, you'll see something strapped to Jurg's back. In addition to traditional safety equipment, mountain guides are also required by law to carry rifles for polar bear protection. In reality, polar bear sightings are rare as we gravitate towards areas with good skiing as opposed to ideal bear habitat. A typical day of Arctic skiing, the soft light of the polar day shines in the horizon even at midday. Can you see the tiny dot that's our ship waiting for us down in Barentsburg? Here is the top of the final pitch above the icefall below Lagemannstoppen. It's the Rembrandt von Rijn. Have a look at what Adam has on his feet. Many people ask if we take snowboarders. Yes, split boards work really well so long as you have a good pair of ski crampons that fit them. So these are some of the reasons Svalbard is such a great place to do a ski trip and why I keep returning year after year. Why ski and sail? Well, sailboats, of course, have a long and ancient history for exploration. But why in this modern age wouldn't we use a more efficient way of getting around by car or by helicopter, for example? But in Svalbard, there are almost no roads. A total of 42 kilometers of roads exist, mostly around Longyearbyen, and helicopter access is strictly forbidden. There are a couple of other options, such as getting around on foot, or by snowmobile, or with dog sleds. But the problem with ground-based expeditions is that they require a great deal of time as well as round-the-clock polar bear watches. A sailboat allows us to travel great distances in comfort without having to worry about polar bears sniffing at our camp at night. So there's no other infrastructure. They're very comfortable. We can travel great distances with them overnight if necessary. And of course, sailing. I would say that virtually all of my ski and sail guests are really excited about the sailing aspect. And yes, indeed, we do hoist the sails whenever the winds are favorable. So this map shows you the zone that we access during Svalbard's ski and sail season. It's a vast area from north to south, north around Bjørnfjord down to Belsund. It's a vast area of about 300 kilometers and covering many hundreds of kilometers of shoreline and fjords. To get to Svalbard, there are daily flights from Oslo to Longyearbyen. Longyearbyen is located right here on a smaller fjord called the Advent Fjord, which is a small fjord that butts off of Isfjorden. And from Longyearbyen, we sail almost due west into the area of Immerbukta and Tryghamna. Tryghamna means safe harbor. As you can see, it's a little harbor perched right on the edge of the Greenland Sea here. It was used for whaling ships as a place to wait out the weather and wait for ideal conditions. We do the same thing often. We hang out there. There's excellent skiing in both Immerbukta and Tryghamna. But as soon as possible, we start to head north. And this is called Forlandssundet. Forland means kind of like it sounds, an area in front of the land. The Forland is a long, thin island that protects a part of the west coast of Spitsbergen from the westerly winds. From there, we start working our way north into the St. John's Fjord and further north into Kingsfjord, into Crossfjord, and occasionally we can get as far north as Bjørnfjord in the far north end of Spitsbergen. Prince Karl's Forland, it's this long, thin island here, provides excellent skiing as well. Most spectacular being the Grimaldi area, which I showed you earlier on with the tall rocky spires. The ship we've used for most of the past 8 years is the Norderlich, and it is arguably the prettiest ship in the Arctic. All of our boats we use are purpose-built for Arctic waters, with ice-strengthened hulls and other safety features that allow safe passage through drift ice. So what does a typical day for us in Svalbard look like? Our goal, of course, is this, what you're seeing right now, spectacular summits under blue skies with beautiful soft powder runs leading down to the seashore at the end of the day. Well, each day starts off with deciding on a route. Here, my colleague on the left, Jurg Wiltz, consults maps with the expedition leader that week, Phil Wickens. Both work hand in hand. If we can't sail there, we can't ski there. So trip planning requires careful coordination between the ski program and the sail program. This is the role of the expedition leader. Every morning, the trip plan is decided upon and either announced or written up on the whiteboard for the day. This way, everyone knows when to be where and what is to expect, what to bring for the day, and so forth. Here we had a late start on Immerbukta, heading up to Karlstadtoppen and Hoftinden. The reason we had a late start was because we had quite severe winds overnight lasting into the early morning, and so we got a late start. In a place with 24 sunlight, it doesn't exactly matter when we start the day. we try to be adaptable to the weather conditions. The weather was forecast to be flurries with light winds of -2 to -5 degrees Celsius, and the first guest dinghy departed at 10 a.m. with about 6 hours of touring anticipated. Now, 6 hours that particular day was because we had to pull anchor and make it to our next destination further south, but in general, you can expect days to last anywhere from 6, even on the low end, 5 hours to 9 or 10 hours on the upper end. So, in the morning we wake up, we enjoy a cup of coffee on the deck or in the saloon, have breakfast, get dressed, and ready for the day. After breakfast is usually a flurry of activity. The guides head to the shore to make sure conditions are right for landing, meaning a good spot to exit the dinghies and onto shore, and most importantly, that there's no sign of polar bear activity. So guests pile into the dinghies and enjoy a spectacular shuttle to the shoreline with a view of the mountains surrounding the fjords. Once on shore, we organize our gear, step onto the snow, and clip into our skis. As we climb higher and higher, our sailboat grows smaller and smaller. This is Immerbukta on day 1. Considering its maritime environment, it might surprise you that due to its low humidity and precipitation, Svalbard is considered a desert. That said, we do occasionally get some cloudy, gloomy weather, but storms are typically brief, and before long the sun peeks out to the clouds again, and we find ourselves eventually on the summit ridge with stupendous views. Well, what goes up must come down, and that's one of the big reasons that we all love to ski tour. This is ski guide Joel McBurney heading down towards Grimaldi Bukta. At the end of the day, we load back onto the dinghies and return to the sailboat. After a long day of skiing, the sailboat saloons provide a comfortable place to kick back, relax, enjoy appies, and rest after the day and exchange stories. Here we have Chris Knieser, who is the expedition leader for us for the past few years. He's been doing trips to Svalbard for close to 20 years. At the end of each day, we have a briefing on the day. We exchange stories from the different groups who've gone in different directions, see how everybody's days went. We discuss our plan for the evening sail, where we're going to be heading to next. Shortly after the Zodiac is hoisted onto the boat, we usually pull anchor and sail to the next fjord while dinner is prepared by the hardworking cook and crew. Our ship is like a backcountry ski lodge that moves, and the deck in the evening is a great place to watch the Arctic landscape roll by and watch for whales and seabirds. In recent years, I've discovered that the value of a pair of down pants to keep the cool sea breeze out. This, by the way, is my daughter Ruth, who joined me this past spring in Svalbard for a week. With 24-hour sunlight, the show never stops. Here, Glenn is enjoying the first of 2 big polar trips that he had planned for 2018. The second one was in Antarctica in November. Well, eventually dinner's served. Here in the lower saloon on the Norderlicht with the lights turned down, it almost feels like a real evening instead of the middle of the 2-month polar day. After a long day in the hills, guests turn in around 9 p.m. for a good night's sleep with a gentle rocking of the ship in harbor. Ski and sail trips are more than just skiing. They're a real adventure in the true sense of the word. They combine obviously great skiing with wildlife viewings, with tours through some of the small settlements in the area. Svalbard has a history of exploration, whether it be for mining or for whaling or walrus, and it's a pretty amazing place to tour around. There are several small settlements that we try to visit each trip. The first, of course, is Longyearbyen. That's where everybody ends up. There is a small town of Barentsburg. Population is about 400. It used to be a mix of Russian and Ukrainian. These days, it's starting to dwindle. Mainly Russian coal miners live there. Further north is Ny-Ålesund. You may have heard of Ny-Ålesund. It's the farthest north settlement in the world. It features a small post office and a grocery store and has a population of around 25 permanent inhabitants. As I mentioned, walrus hunting features into the history of Svalbard. That's how it was initially settled and how it was initially discovered that you could indeed overwinter in Svalbard. Later, a few coal mines were developed, but otherwise, it's a land with very little mining or commercial activity. In recent years, all but one of its coal mines has been closed. Currently, the main industry is tourism, and during the winter, it's a popular tourist destination for those in search of the novelties of the darkness of the polar night and northern lights. And in the summer, cruise ships and hikers visit. In the springtime, ski touring is very, very popular these days. This photo is taken in Ny-Ålesund, the world's northernmost community. Ny-Ålesund, it's located on a little spit of land, a little peninsula that separates the sound between Prince Karls Forland and Spitsbergen. And there's this really cool ski tour that we can do that basically traverses the peninsula from one side to the next. And at the very end, just before we hit the harbor and our waiting boat, which has sailed around the peninsula and is waiting for us, we're greeted by this little locomotive. Not only did Ny-Ålesund boast to be the world's farthest northernmost community, but also the farther northernmost railway. It's not operational anymore. People have often asked me what my favorite mountains to ski in Svalbard are. That's a tough question. I've been there many times, at least 10 times over the past 8 years, 10 different trips over the past 8 years. And I've got many, many favorite mountains and mountain trips, but I'm going to narrow it down to two different peaks. The first is, I would say it's a kind of an insignificant peak. It's called Fjord. It tops out at 525 meters above sea level. So we're starting at zero every day. The tour requires a climb of about 525 meters. It's directly above the Russian coal mining town of Barentsburg. So this here on the right is a photograph taken just as you arrive in Barentsburg. And then on the left, I have a picture of my other favorite mountain trip memory, which I'm not going to tell you its real name. We'll just call it Snowy Peak for the sake of privacy and discretion. So Barentsburg, this is a picture of me coming up the steps in Barentsburg carrying my skis. My very first trip to Svalbard in 2018, at the very end of the trip on day 7 of the sailing, I guess it would have been the 6th night of the sailing, we spent the whole day in Immerbukta and these wonderful tours up into the Alpine. We have dinner crossing East Fjord. The plan was to visit the pub, which is called the Red Bear. Its claim to fame used to be that it's the northernmost pub in the world. Now it's the second northernmost, beaten out by a few miles by a microbrewery in Longyearbyen. But as soon as we pulled in, it was probably, I guess, around 9 o'clock at night. And everybody, we were down in the lower saloon. We were feeling relaxed. We were feeling cozy. We were feeling well fed. My wet boots were hanging up to dry. My clothes had been changed. I was feeling like, yeah, this has been a great day. Time to go to bed. And one of the guests says, Tom, can we go for a midnight ski tour? And I thought, oh my goodness, a midnight ski tour. Okay, sure. I'm tired. It's been a long week, but sure, let's go for a midnight ski tour. So surprisingly, everybody was on board or rather quickly got dressed and got off board. We pulled into our ski boots, got dressed for another skiing day part 2, and walked out into bright sunlight, just like you see here. This is taken at about 9 o'clock at night. As we walked through the town, we could see that the Soviet area hasn't quite been shaken from the town of Barentsburg. Here we have a bust of Lenin. There's a law on Svalbard, and I'm not sure whether the Russians are following it because it's a law or because they just think it's kind of a nice heritage item to have this bust of Lenin there. But there's a law in Svalbard that says that anything that was in place before 1925 has to stay there. So any sort of structures or artifacts or whatever needs to stay there. So this, of course, predates that, and it's staying there. So as you continue up through the town, you can see it's a rugged industrial town. There's chimney stacks belching coal smoke from the coal-fired generator that burns the brown coal. Very industrial feeling. And you can see all of the buildings, they look like new buildings, but in fact, they've just been clad with something that makes them look pretty new. The actual structures are more than 50 years old, dating back from the middle of the Cold War period. Well, we continued on up through rebar sticking out of the snow and rusty industrial debris. And pretty soon we found ourselves up in the Alpine. And at exactly midnight, this is a picture that my co-guide Conrad Jansen snapped to me. At exactly midnight, we locked in our heels and skied down. And it was just this heavenly experience of seeing that at this point, the sun was hovering about 8 degrees above the horizon at the low point of the day. And I think that it was just a day of contrast and juxtapositions of, being tired and having this beautiful day in the Alpine. As you can see, it was an absolutely crystal clear, spectacular day. And then just deciding to do this amazing tour. And I think what sealed it for me was finishing the day at the Red Bear. Well, it's called the Red Bear because there's a red bear that you can ride and take selfies on. Finished the day at the Red Bear, pounded back some vodka shots and beers with the Russians, and called it a day. Great memory. My other one, Snowy Peak. I've been looking at this mountain for years and dreaming about climbing it, but just conditions never lined up, whether it be weather, whether it be the snowpack, whether it be the crevasse bridging, because as you can see, it's heavily crevassed through these ice falls, or just whether or not the group would be up for it. The summit is 1,200 meters above sea level. The tallest mountain in Svalbard is Newton-Toppen. It rises to an elevation of just over 1,700 meters. So this is a far cry from that, but it's a much more spectacular mountain. Snowy Peak has a lot of prominence. Newton-Toppen, you have to get there through a multi-day ski tour, and it just is this kind of rounded dome in the middle of the ice cap. So really spectacular. Finally, one day the conditions lined up and we decided to go for it. This picture is taken halfway up, heading through the ice fall. This is Cosima. She was right behind me the whole way up. She was very excited about this tour. It was really spectacular. Here we are looking back down at the fjord. You can't quite see. Our ship is just at a site here on the right-hand side here. And here my group is following up in my tracks here. Very spectacular ascent. Farther up we got, the more incredible the view became. And then finally we attained the summit at 1,200 meters above sea level. There's Cosima, staring out over the Foreland Sound. And as I mentioned, what goes up must come down. The descent was incredible. And here we were just blessed with most perfect powder conditions from top to bottom. Well, the day wasn't done. As it turns out, it was a little bit like my Barentsburg day where things just kind of kept going. We pulled into the Norderlicht and we had dinner and we were just settling down for the evening. And these two gals, this is Sarah in the background and Lotte in the foreground. And here's Chris, the expedition leader, and one of the guests, Lawrence, decided to join us. The ship's crew is very hardworking. They work from dawn till dusk and often on watches through the night when we're putting in long days. And both Lotte and Sarah were skiers, but they hadn't brought their ski equipment. They obviously were working too hard to come out with us. It's not their position to go out with us. But this is the last day of the trip. And we had nothing planned for the next day. And one of the guests suggested that I take Lotte and Sarah out for a ski tour. They, of course, were very excited, but they didn't have any ski equipment. Well, it turned out that wasn't a problem. The guests all conspired together and found boots. And one guest had a split board that they lent to Sarah. Another guest had boots and skis that would fit Lotte, who was about 6 feet tall, and took them out for an evening back up onto the mountain. It just really made me happy to be able to give back to these two young women who'd been working so hard for us the entire week and give these sailors a few turns on this wonderful snow that we had experienced that day. So I touched a little bit on Svalbard's wildlife. Svalbard is inhabited by just 4 land mammals. We've got voles, which are a bit like little mice. We've got Arctic foxes, reindeer, and polar bear. Polar bear is arguably a marine mammal because it spends so much time in the ocean, but especially these days with the pack ice disappearing, it sort of straddles between both marine and land mammal designation. Well, the voles and the reindeer eat the grasses and the seeds, and the foxes and the polar bears eat the voles, and on rare occasions, polar bears will hunt reindeer when their regular food source, seal, is unavailable. Marine mammals include whale, seals, walrus, and of course polar bears, as I mentioned. We see foxes, reindeer, whale, seal, and walrus all the time, but polar bear sightings are relatively rare. Of course, when we do get a chance to see polar bears, it's always a highlight of the trip. For safety reasons and due to regulations, we keep our distance. Polar bears have a reputation of being very predatory, which is true, but in reality, they're shy and very focused on their business of searching for seal. So as a rule, they don't tend to bother humans. Reindeer, on the other hand, are super plentiful. One of my favorite memories is skiing down the Sofia Glacier in St. John's Fjord and catching a movement out of the corner of my eye. I looked over and there I was being accompanied by a tiny herd of small reindeer galloping down the slopes right beside me. One of my favorite memories as well. So it's a ski trip, but it's also springtime in Svalbard, and we do get warm, sunny weather at times. When that happens, a literal polar dip is the thing to do. Here, our expedition leader, Chris Gneezer, shows us how it's done with style. For those of you who are wondering, the water temperature, I measured it that day and it was 0.2 degrees Celsius. So all of our ships are sailing vessels. Why is that? Motor vessels are available, but I found that the majority of guests are looking for an expedition that combines traditional sailing with skiing. When the sails are up and the engines are quiet, there's no better way to travel. Yes, when necessary, and that is fairly often, we use the engines, but our guests come not just for the skiing, but also for the chance to hoist the sails and enjoy wind-powered travel whenever possible. Our ski and sail trips began on this lovely sailboat, the Norderlicht. Built in 1910, she is older than the Titanic. People have asked, why a sailboat instead of a motor vessel? I think this photo says it all. A Norderlicht also has comfortable and spacious cabins. There are a total of 10 double cabins on board with a capacity of 12 guests in total. Double occupancy is included with the standard pricing, but we also provide reasonably priced single occupancy upgrades for those who are traveling alone and value their privacy. The Rembrandt van Rijn is a larger vessel which hosts 29 guests and 16 cabins. The cabins have private bathrooms with showers and overall are a little more spacious and luxurious than on Norderlicht. The newest vessel in our lineup is Keelak. Keelak is a beautiful boat, custom made by KM Yacht Builders in 2018 for expedition sailing at a high standard, and in my opinion, she is the finest small expedition sailboat operating in Svalbard in 2025. She's a perfect size for a group of 8 or 9 guests, and she also boasts a small sauna. How to prepare for this multi-day ski touring trip? First of all, I want to touch on whether or not you can do it. So ski skills. We ask that you are at least a strong intermediate to advanced skier. Obviously, the fitter you are, the better your exercise will be. You'll ski more, you'll be less susceptible to injury. We don't assume any level of experience for the technical aspects such as crevasse rescue, avalanche safety. These are the responsibility of the guides. And finally, we do ask that you have a willingness to push out of your comfort zone at times. Things like boot packing, traveling rope on glaciers, occasionally traveling in whiteouts with limited visibility and wind. These are all going to be part of this expedition. So can you do it? So we ask that what exactly does a strong intermediate ski ability look like? Well, it simply means you have to get safely down any kind of snow. Times there may be crusty or challenging snow. That might mean you have to use a bit of survival skiing, but we ask that you can safely get down. Steep skiing options will be available for expert skiers. We get asked all the time from, I guess, both ends of the spectrum, people that are weaker skiers or not as fit. Can I do this trip? We also get asked by strong skiers who are used to skiing couloirs and big days. Will I get slowed down by a kind of a classic paced group? On these trips, we have multiple guides, at least 3, typically 4 guides in total. And this allows us to adapt to different groups with different paces and skill levels and objectives. And we've found that we have virtually always been able to adapt the program to suit individuals on a daily basis. What sorts of technical skills do our guests need? Apart from the basic fundamentals of being a strong intermediate skier, we ask that you're proficient with your transition. So that means skins on, skins off, switching your ski bindings over from ski mode to walk mode and vice versa, switching your boots from walk mode to ski mode. And especially with split borders, it's a bit more complicated. So knowing how to efficiently and quickly do those transitions is really useful and valuable. That said, if you come with zero experience, especially if you take part in our pre-sale option, which is 3 days in Longyearbyen, that's the role of the guides too. We will give you some coaching and tips on how to make those transitions smoother and faster. Glacier travel. There's nothing special there. If you don't have any experience on glacier travel, even though 99% of our travel is on glaciers, we travel on glaciers every single day. The only skill you need to know is how to tie a figure 8 on a bight. And that's something, again, if you practice at home, it's ideal, but we can also teach that to you in the field. It's ideal if you arrive proficient with using ski crampons, at least that you know how to put them on and off of your specific binding. Each binding takes a different type of ski crampon, so make sure that you arrive with the right ski crampon for the right binding and you know how to put it on and off. Boot crampons and ice axes are used on occasion, especially for the stronger groups looking for more technical objectives. If you don't have these, or if you have old, clunky, heavy steel crampons or ice axes, just contact us if you need some loaners. I guess that segues into the clothing and equipment that you'll want to have for a day of Svalbard ski touring. It's very similar to what you would be used to using normally. People ask me, should I bring a ski helmet? Ski helmets, of course, are always recommended. They're kind of par for course these days, especially in Svalbard where we have rocks sticking up and hard snow surfaces. It's a very important thing to have. We ask that you come with lightweight boots with tech inserts and high quality liners that will keep your feet warm and comfortable, and that you've spent at least a few days on those boots and have them boot fitted before you arrive. As far as clothing goes, it's nothing special. Temperatures, as I mentioned, range typically from -10 to -2, sometimes a little colder, sometimes up to +5. So probably very comparable to what you've experienced. Gore-Tex shell, soft shell jacket and pants, long underwear, medium weight fleece, light windbreaker, puff jacket, a couple pairs of wool socks should be fine. Backpacks, 35 to 40 liter backpack. People have asked me about bringing avalanche airbags. It's kind of like a ski helmet. This is something that will keep you safe, but it's not something that we require or can even recommend. It's a personal choice of whether you bring an avalanche airbag or not. Ski goggles, very important. Sunglasses, a neck and a face buff to protect you against the wind. A toque. For those of you in Canada, you know what the word toque means. For the rest of the world, that means a wool cap. Thermos to keep your drinks warm throughout the day, and water bottle. Basically, you want to bring enough capacity to bring 2 liters of water in total, or fluids in total for the day. Bring a lunch container. Some sort of a hard plastic container is ideal, or a little baggie to carry your lunch in. Ski straps are vital in Svalbard for bundling up your skis for the boat, for the dinghy rides back and forth. Sunscreen, lip balm, and a headlamp. Well, why would you bring a headlamp in a place that has 24-hour sunlight? Very good question. Sometimes at night in your room when the door's closed, it's dark and you need to find stuff. So that's where a headlamp would be useful. But apart from that, you don't need a headlamp at all in Svalbard. A probe. You want to have at least a 240 centimeter non-ultralight probe. You want to bring a modern digital beacon and a shovel. Don't forget your ski crampons, as mentioned. And you're also required on these trips to bring an ultralight harness and at least 1 locking carabiner, preferably 2 locking carabiners. And skis, if you're bringing your own skis, anything from 100 to 115 underfoot works. 105 seems to be the magic number. We also provide rentals if you don't have exactly the right skis, or if you don't like to travel with your skis on the airlines. Make sure that your poles have powder baskets, and make sure that your skins are, that the glue is fresh and that they have good glide. Okay, we're reaching the end here. Logistics. There's daily flights to Longyearbyen from Oslo with SAS and Norwegian. From there, it's a 10-minute shuttle to town. There's an airport shuttle that runs after every flight arrives, so that's not a problem. We suggest spending a couple of days in Oslo en route to enjoy the city. There's all kinds of reasons for that. It helps you get over your jet lag. In the case of delays or baggage delays or missed connections, it gives you time to make your flight to Longyearbyen on time and for your skis to catch up to you. On that subject, though, we strongly recommend that you carry your boots with you. We have loaner skis. There's rental skis available. So if your skis go missing, that's something we can roll with. But if you're like me, your boots are precious, and it's really hard to find a pair of boots that fit you well and they won't give you blisters or won't give you sore spots on your ankle bones that fit you snugly. So we strongly recommend that you carry your boots as a personal item with you in case of baggage delays, along with essential clothing in your ski pack. And then closely related to that, we do strongly encourage you to consider our 3-day land-based ski touring trip in Longyearbyen. It's a fascinating town. It's worth getting to know it and discovering and exploring. And it does offer ski tours of a kind that are not actually found elsewhere in Spitsbergen during the sailing trip. So in 2025, we are offering 2 different trips. One will be on the Kielak and one is on the Norderlicht. The Kielak I've used before in northern Norway. It's a great boat. KM Yacht Builders is one of the finest yacht builders in the world. It's custom built for Arctic expeditions by Philip Carlier, who is a retired Air Force pilot in the Belgian Air Force. I had the pleasure of sailing with him, and he was captain for one of the trips in northern Norway. I love that boat, and I was frequently getting compliments from other mountain guides who wish they were on the Kielak instead of the boats that they were on. The other one, of course, is the Norderlicht. Norderlicht we've been using for 8 years now, and the Norderlicht is available for 2025 and 2026. And the final one is the deluxe trip on the Rembrandt from the Rhine. It's a little bit larger, takes 29 passengers, has quite a different style, kind of more of a smaller cruise ship style, but it offers quite a high standard of comfort, and it also allows for quite a bit longer distance travel since it has a larger crew and can sail through it around the clock. Yeah, I really hope to see each of you on one of our trips someday.